Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janine Donnelly, Manager of Webinars for Tech Channel, and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You may ask a question at any time during the event by entering it into the Q&A panel. If you experience technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel to alert us, and someone will assist you. You may download a PDF version of the slide deck by clicking on the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources. You'll find that on the left side of your screen, and know that you can download those right from the platform without being disconnected from the webinar. Today's webinar, 10 Steps to True Mainframe Agility, is sponsored by BMC Software and CompuWare, a BMC company. And now I'd like to turn it over to your moderator for today's event, Eric Odell, Solutions Marketing Director for App Dev and DevOps at BMC. Eric, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you everyone for joining us. Before we get started, I want to talk about CompuWare, a BMC company. Recently, CompuWare joined the BMC family of solutions to empower the next generation of developers to mainstream the mainframe regardless of their skill or experience levels. And CompuWare, a BMC company, provides a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain that increases volume and velocity. And the benefit is that you can bring apps that run on the mainframe to market faster with increased quality throughout the process of analyzing, building, testing, deploying, monitoring, and tuning your innovative apps and services. And the combined offering with BMC accelerates each client's evolution to an autonomous digital enterprise. So Rick Slade is CompuWare's Executive DevOps Solution Architect. A DevOps evangelist, Rick has more than 10 years of experience helping customers to develop enterprise DevOps ecosystems to excel in the digital economy. Rick is a certified Scaled Agilist from the Scaled Agile Framework Group and an Open Group Distinguished IT Specialist. Craig Hartwell is CompuWare's Global Application Development and DevOps Solutions Lead with years of experience enabling organizations in financial services, retail, and government to embrace DevOps on mainframe-centric environments and empowering these organizations to achieve their digital transformation initiatives. My name is Eric Odell, and I'll be your moderator today. Now, we're going to get started by talking about just what do these 10 steps to true mainframe agility, what do they mean to you and your organization? First, we should all agree that the slow, inflexible processes and methods of the past have really become intolerable impediments to success in today's innovative-centric digital markets. IT leaders must therefore bring the proven advantages of Agile, DevOps, and related disciplines to bear on mainframe applications and the data that run their businesses. But how do we actually begin this process? Mainframe transformation can seem overwhelming, and no IT leader wants to embark on a boil-the-ocean project that consumes resources and generates risk without a high probability of near-term concrete rewards. In this webinar, we're going to spell out a proven phased approach for measurably modernizing your mainframe practices. And as you follow this approach, you can rack up high-impact near-term wins at each stage along the way. We believe that every organization has its own existing processes, tools, and culture, so this mainframe transformation game plan can be modified to fit any organization's specific needs. Remember, your mainframe must be as adaptive as any other platform, and enterprise IT must be able to manage DevOps in an integrated manner across mainframe, distributed, and cloud. So let's get going on laying this plan out for you. And we're going to begin with this question about step one. I'm going to pitch this over to Craig Hartwell. And we want to know, Craig, how do organizations get started with evolving software delivery for the mainframe?
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for inviting me along today. It's great to be with you all. And we've been working on these 10 steps over at CompuWare for some time now, and it's fair to say that they have evolved through customer engagement and customer success Just a little bit of my background is very non-mainframe in the distributed in the cloud world prior to the last 5 years. And what we saw was an evolution in that whole DevOps culture around teams that were distributed around an organization coming together in kind of new tribes and new teams. So coming into the mainframe world and trying to bring some of that distributed kind of mindset, what we noticed in this mainframe space is there was still very much a siloed approach towards the teams delivering. And so to be able to really determine what the desired state is, we were often being asked as an external body to come in and kind of break down those silos and quite often introduce these different teams for the first time. So by doing so, we were able to introduce techniques like value stream mapping or even simple Gemba walkthroughs to start to visualize how an organization is currently delivering their IT products, services, or what have you. And ultimately, from there, start to identify the bottlenecks and the blockers to stop them getting to where they need to get to. It's been amazing in some of these engagements because quite often, these sessions that we run as value stream mapping sessions are almost the light bulb moments that the organization see for the first time. They visualize their work very much around the DevOps principles of step one, visualizing that kind of work process and having those different parts of the business sit together in a room, albeit a virtual room quite often, and start to see where those bottlenecks and those challenges are. And this we see, Eric, as an almost iterative process towards understanding the customer's current state and ultimately where they want to get to from a short-term, medium, long-term. Some of the things that we put into our engagement model with our customers are some tools that very much help capture the current delivery cadence, be it mean time to repair or number of releases in an instance, and be able to kind of call upon that data near real time, such that they can see tangibly over and over again how they are doing and how they're moving forward. This really helps in terms of planning as well, and almost asking for funding, let's say, for the next version of a project. So value stream mapping is something that we use extensively. Using that on an iterative basis is the way that we go forward. And I don't know, Rick, would you like to comment on value stream mapping process that we use?
Yeah, glad to, Craig, and also thankful to the folks who joined us, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. That value stream mapping process is, I think, a critical step in getting started. There's a couple of things I think that are critical. First, the executive buy-in to this process. So there's got to be a lot of education to executives and to the people who are going to be responsible for leveraging this evolution of software delivery within your organization. So getting that buy-in, I think, is extremely critical. To Craig's point, value stream mapping is a wonderful exercise to understand your current processes. I believe that the software delivery modernization is an evolutionary process. And I think that there's a lot of processes, a lot of techniques used by developers today that will be quite useful in a modern software delivery environment. And so understanding how those processes work, understanding where your constraints are, where your gaps are, that mapping of that will communicate to those responsible for the evolution of your software delivery environment, where they can focus their energies and times and priorities. So great exercise. Eric?
All right, that's some great insights there. Rick, let's move on to step two, and I have a question to help you start off. So why is a modern IDE important in evolving the mainframe software delivery?
Well, and good question. A lot of people think, we, especially those of us who've been around the mainframe for a long, long time, are very used to TSO and ISPF. We've developed our own tips. We've developed our own technology aids to aid us in the work that we do on the mainframe. But that modern development environment is going to add a lot of other capabilities to the software delivery environment. I think that there's the obvious that from a productivity standpoint, it's hard. You won't be able to convince me that the green screen developer can do as much as the efficient developer using a modern IDE. There's just more that you can do, more activities that you can engage in with the same screen real estate. And so if you think about software development, it's combined of a lot of different activities. There's the manipulation or editing, creation of the code, but there's also the creation of test data and other things that you're looking at. And a modern graphical IDE gives you the ability, I think, to navigate all of those tasks much faster. I think there's a significant quality benefit to a modern IDE. If you think about all the things you can do, if you think about a modern developer using Java or Swift or any other modern language, you think about the editing tools that are available to them with regard to syntax checking and syntax help, syntax recommendations, things like that. All those are now available to the mainframe developer. And so there's just their productivity and quality benefits to leveraging an IDE. But in my mind, the biggest benefits to leveraging a modern IDE are more business-centric. If you think about these systems that are so vital to our organizations today, and you think about who is maintaining, who is supporting those systems, and there's a lot of us who have been doing this for a long, long time, and we're going to have to transition to other resources who are going to take over the reins and be supporting these applications by providing an IDE, an environment that they're used to, that they're comfortable with. They're going to be more productive very fast or faster than having to go and to educate, train them on the usage of ISPF. And so I think you're going to get new people up to speed faster, and their ability to do work is going to be greatly increased. The other thing it's going to give you from a business standpoint is the ability to recruit and retain resources. Bringing in new programmers, especially from the universities, they're going to come in, it's going to be an environment that they're comfortable with. They're going to work in that environment. They're not going to want to work on something that they haven't been trained in. So I think from a recruitment standpoint, from a retainment standpoint, and certainly from a productivity and quality standpoint, a modern IDE is a critical component to a modern software delivery environment. Greg,
all right, those are some great points. I think we're going to have to move on to step 3 here, and I'm going to ask Craig a question here. About adopting the automated testing. Craig, there are many different stages of testing in the software development lifecycle. Which ones can be automated?
So it's fair to say that most stages of the SDLC can be automated in some fashion, but it's key to identify the right area to automate next, so you can get the best return for the investment made. We often find that cultural adoption of new ways of working are quite often bigger inhibitors rather than technical fixes. To Rick's point just there, adopting a new IDE that looks very similar to a GitHub or a Jenkins pipeline is often very difficult for people that have spent their lives in a green screen environment. And if we look at test automation as a great example, there are certain things that you can do with a modern interface that plugs into a Jenkins pipeline through open APIs that you just cannot do in an old school green screen environment. And so testing, we've found as we've developed our test automation capability, testing kind of takes on a life of its own, in as much as when we first start talking to our customers about test automation, quite often we have to have a level set around nomenclature. Quite often people will interchange unit tests with functional tests, with system tests, with regression tests, without real clear definition. So one of the things that we've had to do is ensure that the first thing we map out the testing lifecycle. And to my point here around identifying the right stages, let's identify what are those key stages such that we use the same language and we understand, we both have the definition of what a unit test is before we start to put automation and a wrap around it. The other thing around automated testing, as we found, we've kind of taken the value stream mapping process, which can be very holistic or very, very minute, and we put it around the testing lifecycle. So from the point at which you write a line of code, right the way until the point you deprecate a production environment, it goes on a life cycle of testing, and each and every different phase is slightly different. right? By identifying those stages and understanding who is responsible, what are the key handoffs between the different stages, and more importantly, who's accountable for ensuring that those environments are ready between those stages. What we've found is it's not just about testing, automating certain stages, it's the handovers in between. And little things like, we found that test data provision, for example, becomes intrinsically important, because there's no point automating the test process itself if you can't automate the injection of test data. So we go about test stream mapping in a very similar way to value stream mapping, but testing is rife for automation, and that's what we found with our customers.
The only thing I would add, Craig's exactly right. The only thing I would add to that is that don't limit yourself from a testing standpoint. All phases of testing can be automated. We found that at CompuWare. It starts with unit testing, then there's functional testing, then there's going to be some integration testing, and then subsequently moving on to performance and regression type testing. All of those testing type activities can be automated now. And with a modern tool like Jenkins, the ability to leverage even older testing technologies through the execution of JCL in that pipe is now possible. So any type of testing is now available in this modern software delivery environment.
Some great points. So, Rick, we're going to take this next question back to you. Question for step 4. What is the business advantage with graphical code and data analysis tools?
That goes back to what we talked about earlier, especially with bringing in resources who may not have the experience with the systems that they're now going to be charged with maintaining. So having technology tools, graphical tools, that can communicate how these systems are put together is an incredibly significant advantage for people, again, who may not have experience with these systems. And if you're moving to an Agile world, you're going to spread that work out. You're going to be working with smaller units, and you may be involved or in supporting code or applications that, again, you may not have worked on. We had an example of that at CompuWare where we had some resources that were assigned coding projects to systems that they had not worked on. And so the idea of building out these tools to support and to help those individuals become more comfortable with the flow of those systems and a useful tool and finding data fields and variables and files and logic within that code, having that type of technology available to you to speed up the analysis, or what I would call the impact analysis, it was significant and a huge business advantage. So you're just shortening the time in that software delivery cycle.
And look, I'd just like to add a comment as a kind of a Generation X person. I've seen the transition from DOS into Windows, right, in the non-mainframe world. And I don't see too many people kind of going, I wish I could go and do a thing in DOS that I used to be able to do, because ultimately, while command line is rife, obviously for the developer community, the intuitive graphical interface, once it starts to be adopted, it's the productivity goes through the roof. And I think people overlook it once they start to get buried into it. So, Eric, it's something that our customers learn to love, after having years of green screen experience.
And Eric, I'll be short in this response too, but Craig hit on something that reminded me of something. The ability, you think about how work is done, how you define the work that needs to be done, and when a change comes your way. With these type of tools, going back to our automation discussion, you can actually begin to automate that impact analysis work. With these tools, you can create a punch list of changes that need to be made with regard to a specific system change. These tools can do a much better and faster job of identifying that work. Eric?
Okay, that's great. So Craig, let's take a look at step 5. Can seasoned developers leverage these capabilities, and then what's in it for them?
Yeah, and I guess, we're kind of part way through here, Eric, and I just wanted to point out to our listeners that ultimately these steps are here as a guide. They don't need to be done in a serial fashion. We tend to suggest always that visualization piece up the front, but whether you apply a graphical user interface or you look at some automation process, ultimately all of these things are designed to try and help you along the way in terms of becoming quicker, faster, safer in terms of how you deliver things. My personal journey of stepping into the mainframe world, having not been in this space, is that there are a lot of tried and tested developers that are happy and have made their career out of using the slightly older processes that can't be kind of automated out of the box, and the rest of the distributed world has really kind of accelerated up and past. But there is absolutely an opportunity to automate near anything in a coding world, and when you are working in a bank or a government body, anything that's in a highly regulated environment, any time that we can put some automation that will include governance and compliance or code checking in some form or some shape or form, it takes away that human element of error, which inevitably can happen to all of us. And so by automating some of those steps that traditionally wasn't seen as necessary, we speed up the delivery while improving the quality. And I think quality gates is a very important thing. So we have some certain vendors that we engage with almost every time that an organization wants to improve their delivery while retaining quality. And having automated quality gates such that you can look at things like code coverage, such that you can look at your pass rate before you actually hand it off to the next stage in a pipeline is ultimately it's important and valuable to anybody who is writing lines of codes, be it young, old, or indifferent. And so, we've had some amazing, success stories with our customers in terms of adopting these processes. And I think as we bring new concepts to a mainframe community that sometimes hasn't seen, what the shift left nomenclature can actually mean. Well, I remember in one particular instance, we went down and we actually shown that you can actually identify errors in your code as you are writing them into your program, and be it identified at the very point at which it's being entered. You cannot shift left any further than that, right? And that was done with the guy that has been doing coding on the green screen for many, many years. So those aha moments for us in terms of introducing these new ways to a generation that hasn't used them is ultimately so rewarding that it's bringing them into a new way of delivering code.
And I think, Eric, and Craig, that I love the word seasoned developer. I guess I'm one of those guys. I would go as far as to say that the evolution or the modernization of your software delivery infrastructure can't be completed without them, because they have so much knowledge about the existing processes and the methods by which they make changes, identify changes, test changes. So much of that knowledge is in their heads, and some of the greatest benefits that I have seen are where those folks who have an intricate understanding of those processes work with your DevOps engineers to build more automated delivery pipelines, leveraging a lot of what you already have. You can get to be much more productive, much faster if you can leverage a lot of what you already do. Now, some you won't be able to leverage, but a lot of it you can. And seasoned developers who have an understanding of those processes, working with DevOps engineers who have knowledge of how to build those type of delivery systems is a wonderful combination. Quite honestly, I don't think you can do it without them.
That's great, Rick. And we are halfway through the 10 steps, and I am seeing quite a number of questions that are coming in from our audience. And I just want to let everybody know that we are going to be getting to all of these questions as we complete this presentation. So stick with us here. We're gonna try to get to every single one of these questions. Rick, in terms of step 6, can mainframe maintenance work be done utilizing Agile practices?
That is the great debate that rages with a lot of mainframe folks. I certainly think they can. not easy in all instances. A lot of these systems are very tightly coupled, very integrated, and being able to segregate components of those systems into smaller units of work to support, agile processes can be challenging. One of the things that I have worked with customers on and helping them accomplish this is a concept I've defined as functional segregation of these systems, where you take a look at these systems, and I know that they're a lot of them are very tightly integrated, but if you can start to segregate, again, what I call functional components of the system. And what I mean by that are there's typically in a lot of these large applications a reporting component. There may be an ETL component. There may be a UI component. And your business rules. One of the things that I think makes sense and has worked well for me in transitioning mainframe maintenance work using Agile practices is the ability to segregate these work. And so you may have 2 or 3 branches for an application, one to change the reporting structures or reporting technology, another branch for ETL transitioning, another branch for UI. They don't have to run at the same time. Potentially they could. But that functional segregation is a method that can help organizations transition to Agile, and that's worked really well. So yeah, it can be done. In some instances, it'll be relatively easy. In a lot of instances, it's going to be tough, but it is that possibility. Functional segregation of the components of a system, I think, give you a working opportunity to do that.
And I think in terms of training, Eric, I think the new methods of how we actually engage with that community. Let's face it, we've been through a year of all having to learn how to work in different ways, and we've had to adapt as well in terms of how we both engage with some of that stuff that we spoke about earlier from a DSM perspective. But from a training, we've gone completely digital and online in as much as how do we share and importantly take feedback from our customers, right? As we sit here with you, 26 minutes into a 45-minute session, we try to move away from 45-minute, hour-long presentations on stuff. People consume things in very different ways now. I call it the TikTok era, right? But short, sharp training capabilities that will help towards those Agile practices, right? And it can. I personally think it can work across any parts of the IT estate, let alone mainframe maintenance.
So, Craig, step 7 is about leveraging operational data across the development, testing, and production lifecycle. How important is data management in a modern CI/CD pipeline?
This has been one of those things that we've found as a wonderful byproduct of engaging closer with our customers. When we speak to people about test data and test data provision, quite often you get the response of, "We got that sorted." Okay, yeah, we do that. It's only when you really start to pick away at the process and look at the data and having the confidence to say, well, I may not be a test expert, right? But if we think about the data that you're testing against, is it really valid, right, to the point at which when you press deploy, you're totally confident that what you have tested against is relevant for that environment? So data provisioning, data setup is, I would say, the biggest revelation in what we've found in terms of test process management, test process mapping, to the point where people, once they kind of let their guard down a little bit and say, well, actually, it's a very manual process and we have to go and scrape this particular server to put that in, all that data's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months old, and so who knows what's moved on from that point. And by automating the process of data acquisition and insertion into a test process, whether it be early in the life cycle or into system or kind of UAT, it's imperative that data is relevant and available, right? And when I talk about availability, the press of a button, we've heard some horror stories where we're trying to automate a test process and save somebody a full 5 minutes, and then we find out it's a 2-week process to go and get test data stood up and provisioned, and it's like, we can't eliminate 2 weeks and 5 minutes, right? We've got to address the big elephant in the room, and that is quite often test data. And I don't know whether it's a hangover of the mainframe world being around for 40, 50 years or what, but in the distributed space, in the cloud space, there are a plethora of tools out there that are available, and test data and test data provision just becomes part of the CI/CD pipeline. And so that's been a real revelation for us. And we really, yes, we've got some tools in this space, but ultimately this is about that kind of bi-directional relationship. And what we've actually delivered for our customers is a platform called C Advisor, which hopefully we'll spend a bit of time on. But it's a free-to-use service that customers share data, and we can actually feed back relevant points of where are the bottlenecks in your pipeline. We've identified time and time again that data provisioning for the test environment seems to be a bottleneck. Rick, what do you think?
No, I tell people all the time, Craig, and you're exactly right. You call it an elephant. I call it the 800-pound gorilla in the room when we start to have these discussions about transforming how we deliver software. It really is, can be a daunting challenge, but it's something that I think is critical in making this work. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not just the provisioning of your test data, but the provisioning of your environment. All of that work that makes up establishing your testing environments in order to test the code changes that you're making. And having a test data management system that your CI/CD pipeline or that your delivery pipelines can leverage for that provisioning is absolutely critical. We can no longer, especially in an Agile world, using Agile processes, we don't have the luxury of taking 2 weeks to build out those test environments and to populate with that test data. We've got to get smarter at figuring out the right amount of test data. I've heard the argument, and there's some truth to it, that there's no better test than running against your production data or your encrypted production data. But we have got to get smarter. There are ways to leverage smaller amounts of data and still achieve the same level of quality with regards to your testing scenarios. We've got tools that do a very good job of helping organizations extract that data. And then, and from a management standpoint, the beauty of this is not only can we extract it dynamically, but we can build those queries and save those queries that can be executed in an automated pipeline, as you described earlier. And that's when you can achieve, the level of quality and the level of speed needed to support fast, quick software delivery.
So the next step is deploying true Agile DevOps-enabling source code management. Now, Rick, why is source code management so critical in an automated software delivery system?
Well, if you think about all of the activities and functions and tasks that a typical SCM provides, let's talk about that. It gives you the ability to, first of all, manage your source code. So that's where a lot of that software delivery work begins. And it's absolutely critical that an SCM be in place that can support the management of that code. But it also has to do it from an Agile standpoint. It's got to be quick, it's got to be fast, it's got to be reliable, it's got to support basic tenets of Agile development, like parallel type development work. And being able to compare changes from one version to another. So it begins with source code management. It's also typically, if you think about mainframe source code management systems, it's responsible also for what I'll define as that build processes, which is your compilation, your link editing. So it's got control of that. So it's managing your source code. It's also responsible for the build of that change code into an executable. And then it also is responsible for that deployment staging from one level to another, depending on how you do that within your shop. So it's absolutely core to that software delivery process because it's actually providing the capabilities that allow you to move code from source code to a production state. So absolutely critical. The one thing that I'll say that again, and I've mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again, is that you need a modern software control system that can work or that can support agile processes. A lot of what we've used for years and years and years was built to support traditional waterfall methods for software delivery, and those just won't work in a modern agile delivery process. So when you're putting together your SCM, which I think is one of those core components to a modern delivery environment, we want to make sure that it has the ability to support all of the capabilities that are leveraged in an agile delivery method. Craig, any other thoughts on the SCM?
I just want to put a slight spin on that, Rick, in as much as, and I don't want to offend anybody out there. Brace yourself, guys, right? But, as mainframe developers, we're in a slight minority against the rest of the world, right? Be it Java developers, be it C, or be it people that spend their lives in CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins and, au fait with GitHub and how they use that and all of the relevant kind of command line worlds that they spend their time living in. And to take that next generation of developers and expect them to go and pick up a 40-year-old source code management platform that, quite honestly, sometimes need coal put in the back of the machine to kind of keep running, right? It's crazy, right? We're not getting people coming out of university that are going to have 40 years of experience to know how to keep this thing moving. So if we don't put something in the middle of this development capability that is modern and that can interface to these new tools, then guess what? The mainframe is going to wither on the vine. And so what we've been trying to do at CompuWare is to say that the source code management piece is absolutely critical to be able to plug into the rest of that distributed world. And that's where we've seen some amazing gains in productivity, not just in how quick can somebody code, how quick can somebody go from ideation through to delivery, and having a modern source code management platform integrated with those tools is a must.
Great. And the SCM is, well, I was just going to say the SCM is critical to that speed addition to your system.
Okay, so step 9 is about automating deployment of code into production. And Craig, there's been automated deployment of code and executables in mainframe source code management systems for decades. What's the difference now?
Well, I think it kind of comes back to my last comment, Eric, and I've got to take you back to a conference I did earlier in the year, or some back end of last year, GSE, and we had a very similar topic in as much as, source code management platform and deployment capabilities, we've been doing this for 40 or 50 years, and my pet hobby is to DJ at weekends, and I started my life playing 70s Motown and disco funk at discos, right? You wouldn't believe it looking at my picture, I know. But the point is, I actually took the time to look at all of the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, those decades of songs, right? The vinyl that was produced and pushed out, right, in a very waterfall fashion, and actually compared the total sale of singles to the #1 TikTok downloaded image, right? And you would not believe the scale of the TikTok image compared to the sale of all of those classic songs, right? And it was that kind of moment of, we have to find new ways of doing things in this modern world. We cannot rely on deployment capabilities that were fine 30 or 40 years ago. That's what happened to vinyl, right? It's now a niche. And the point is, we need to modernize it, much like we talked about source code management in the last point there. But we've got to take a different approach towards it. And, as we bring the mainframe into the mainstream, we have to deliver modern ways of interfacing those open borders worlds, right? It's a must do. We've transformed the way our customers engage with the mainframe in doing so. And we're looking at further ways, right? So VS Code, I think there's something like 100 million developers working in VS Code right now. And I spoke to mainframe developers being in a minority. By bringing the VS Code world into, our tool set, such that deployment is just a function, just a part of the engine, right? So the people are familiar with the code, and then COBOL literally just becomes another syntax then, and all of the mechanics underneath actually are taken care by an organization like CompuWare that actually kind of abstracts away from that. So like I say, that transformation that we've taken them on and integrating with Git and those kind of repositories is totally new ways of working, but very lined up to the next generation of developers coming out of uni.
And one other point that I'll add to that is that if you think about how, Eric, you were right. You said earlier that the deployment of code from SCMs is a capability that's been available for 30 years. What's different in my mind is that our applications that we are deploying are very different now, and this aligns with what Craig just said, than what they were 30 years. 30 years ago, we were building applications targeted to a specific platform. We don't do that anymore. If you look at any modern business system, it's composed of code that is running on multiple platforms. So if you start to think about the deployment of that code, it's not just about deploying mainframe code or deploying distributed code. You're deploying systems that have to work together, that have to be synchronized. And so the deployment of code today is far different than it was 30 years ago, and the ability to synchronize those deployments is absolutely critical. Not only the deployment, but the reversal of that code when there are problems, being able to pull that out in a synchronized fashion is critical to speed of delivery, specifically with mean time to recovery when solving problems. And so code deployment today, I think, is much more complex, much more sophisticated, and tools today to manage that deployment have to be able to accommodate for that. And I think that's a huge and significant difference that we have to understand. We've got to deploy code and support code the way it's architected, meaning that, again, if you've got applications that are leveraging multiple platforms, multiple technologies, we've got to synchronize that deployment of that code.
So, Rick, we find ourselves here at the last step, number 10, which is about enabling coordinated cross-platform continuous delivery. Should distributed system delivery and mainframe system delivery pipes be merged?
That kind of aligns with what we just talked about. A lot of organizations that I've worked with tend to segregate those pipelines, at least initially, where they probably, in a lot of shops, have already invested time and money and energy in building automated builds on the distributed side. We're starting to see the same with regard to the mainframe platform as more organizations begin to see the benefits of automated delivery and DevOps for the mainframe. And so now they're building pipelines for targeted mainframe code delivery. At some point in time, you're going to bring those two together for the reasons that I just talked about. Our pipelines, our software delivery pipelines, and the architecture of those pipelines, I believe, needs to align with the architecture of the systems that we're supporting and the systems that we're making changes to. So, as organizations begin, I think it's fair and I think it's okay to segregate those as you get used to what you cannot do with regard to automated software delivery. But I think for this to truly be effective, then that pipeline has to architecturally align with the value stream that you're supporting from a business standpoint. And that means the merger of code regardless of target. And that speaks to the concept that we've been talking about for years, where the mainframe is just another platform, another server, so to speak, with regard to processing execution, production code delivery. But again, for it to be really efficient, I don't think any organization wants to have separate, it goes back to the word Craig used earlier, silos, to where you've got distributed folks working on their code, mainframe folks working on their code, and two separate delivery systems. There's still a lot of time that's going to have to be used to merge that work and to make sure it's working properly. The way around that, and the true way to better efficiency, is the merger of those pipes to include any code that's a part of a system that's being deployed to a production state.
Rick, if I could just coming back to the question, should they be merged? Right. I think again a slightly different slant. Where we've seen success in mainframe DevOps, right, and Agile adoption in the mainframe, it's quite often where somebody has come in to manage the mainframe from a different part of the business, right? So a good example, a UK bank that we did an awful lot of great work with, the guy that absolutely nailed Java and distributed DevOps tool chains was suddenly given the mainframe. And he personal friend, and basically said, Craig, you know, what is this mainframe thing? How are we going to do this? And it's like, the point is this guy had ticked DevOps off before he understood the mainframe. It's rare that we see the mainframe guys go, I'm now going to be a DevOps expert, okay? So when you get somebody like a CIO or a senior director that's had all of that good experience of the benefits of Java, the benefits of cloud, the benefits of distributed, and then say we're only going to do mainframe in this DevOps tool chain, well, they look at you and say, well, that's crazy. You know, you're saying I'm going to run two different businesses here. So it's again, it goes without saying, as we evolve the mainframe market, right? As we try to mainstream the mainframe and bring it in, as the evolution of the Generation X kind of go through the business and get into those CIO roles where they've seen real tangible business benefits of moving to DevOps, right, on the non-mainframe environments, to say that they've got to do something different is just ludicrous, right? So that's why we've got partnerships with people like Digital AI and other companies that enable that, joint release. I mean, when we take a service from a bank, for example, on our mobile phone, yes, we're hitting a mainframe at the bank, but we're not going direct to that mainframe and grabbing some details out. There's a whole tier of services that need to be upgraded at the same time for it to be a successful service. And so for me, that's the natural evolution for all kind of DevOps journeys. But again, I just want to reiterate here, Eric, that this is an iterative process, right? Once you get to step 10, you better go back to step 1 again and start looking at your value stream map and say, well, okay, where's my next bottleneck? Because ultimately, you're never done with doing this. This is an infinite game, and if you treat it in a finite way, then your competition is going to come and beat you. So.
That's great. I want to thank both Rick and Craig for these fantastic insights that they've been sharing throughout this webcast of 10 steps to true mainframe agility. Now, for those of you who have attended today's webinar, we want to let you know that an ebook is coming out. We're about set to publish this in the next few weeks, and everyone who attended today's event will receive the ebook, 10 Steps to True Mainframe Agility, a phased approach to cross-platform DevOps success. And with this ebook, you can dig just a little deeper on activating your phased approach to mainframe modernization, and also empower your team to make your mainframe as adaptive as any other platform. So I want to move on to the Q&A portion. We've got a number of questions that have come in. And Rick, this one was targeted straight to you. The one that said that Rick spoke of functional segregation. Does CompuWare offer additional training on this idea, and how might one understand better and use and implement?
No specific training that I'm aware of. We probably through Mark Wilson's organization probably could do some things there. Not that any I know of. This is just a technique that I leveraged prior to coming to CompuWare. I spent 10 years at IBM and helping organizations do this. And then prior to that, I worked at HP and was in charge, was the lead principal architect for application modernization. And so there was where I learned to leverage this technique, because these systems are so large. And the only way we could actually do that work is going through this functional segregation. So we would use code analysis tools, typically static code analysis tools, to help us understand how the systems were developed using hierarchy charts and workflow diagrams, data flow diagrams. And we would use those diagrams to help us with the functional segregation, sort of like drawing the line, separating the components into functional areas. And that was just a technique that we used. If someone would like more information, I'm happy to get on the phone and talk about that, how we were accomplished that. sorry to say, I don't think that we don't have anything that I'm aware of. Craig, are you aware of anything that we're doing on the Beam side or CompuWare side to help companies with that?
Nothing specific, but as you say, Rick, this is a conversation. This is part of that. When we set up, and I keep banging this bloody drum about the value stream, but this is all part of that process, right? To identify if that is an area, if the cultural challenges are the biggest issue, then hey, guess what? We don't have a pill for cultural change, but we can at least kind of give some ideas and best practice, and that's what we try to instill in the CompuWare engagement is a free flowing dialogue. So by all means,
Great.
Please get in contact.
So Craig, this question is for you.
Hey Eric, if I could just one real quick comment on that. The key to that work or that analysis work is having the right tools to communicate graphically to give you an ability. If you're going to try to go through that code and do what I call eyeball that code and scan through it, to do that work, it's impossible. Too long, too complicated. But with graphical representations tools like we talked about earlier, that task becomes easier. Not easy, but easier.
Excellent. So, Craig, this question is targeted to you. And this is getting back to step 7 of leveraging operational data across the development, testing, and production lifecycle. The question was, how do you manage data in multiple environments to support multiple Agile teams? How do you do this quickly?
So this is where we kind of getting into the how aspect as to why, and we do have multiple tools. I mean, there are tools in the market that do this kind of thing, but I think where CompuWare has certainly come at this challenge is to link some of the data provisioning tools directly with our testing tools, and also with our source code management, which is linked into the repository tools as well. So there are multiple ways. Again, it's a little bit of the how, and I can see the chap who asked the question would love to get into that next level of detail. But absolutely, we are all about enabling Agile teams to have everything from the environment all the way through to the test data at their fingertips. And so what we've actually done with some of our customers, we've been able to take whole data sets inside a full mainframe instance that we've ran, say, on a ZD&T environment in a public cloud service. Yeah, so here, replay that again. We have a test and dev environment with fully implemented mainframe stack that's running on a Linux server somewhere in the cloud, and then we stick a Docker container around the whole thing, and we make it deployable in 5 minutes, right? So this is the kind of thing that would have taken 5 weeks to set up, right? But we can actually spin this thing out, spin it up, and destroy it within 15 minutes. So it's that new approach towards setting up the data environments as opposed to, is there a next finish type kind of approach towards it. So, and again, it's that approach of understanding the challenge that's in front of our customers to be able to then build something to respond.
Okay. So next question, any lessons learned from CompuWare in terms of change management and how they went Agile? How did the culture accept this change? And do you have any tips or advice in changing the culture?
So Rick, I think we joined around the same time, so we wasn't actually here at the point at which Chris O'Malley, who kind of is CEO of CompuWare, took CompuWare on this particular journey. Is that right, Rick? I know I wasn't here at the beginning. I think at the same time.
No, that's exactly right. Now, I mentioned. Oh, go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
I was going to say, but we've heard the stories, right? In as much as so new CEO comes in with fresh ideas and says, guys, you've not delivered a product or change in the last 18 months. And we're playing in a world where cloud is, available at the press of the button. We are going to, and this is Chris O'Malley's words to both the employees and the industry, we are going to generate new code, new products, new services every 90 days, right? So not 18 months release cycle. We are going to move to a 3-month quarterly release cycle. Anybody who wants to get off the bus right now, thank you very much. It's been great working with you, right? And there was a literal, right, obviously well planned, there was a literal change almost overnight between a waterfall and an Agile culture in as much as, right, we did a burn the boats exercise on the green screen environment, right? So we drank our own Kool-Aid. And of course, Eric, there were some bloody noses, right? These guys have been quite happy sitting in their environment and the desk. And, CompuWare was once a, 19,000 strong organization and had seen those dwindling kind of like renewals and things like that. And this approach, I think in January, we released our 26th quarterly release with that attitude. And it was the cultural change at the top that absolutely made everything else underneath it fall into place. And so being a year behind that and kind of seeing the effects, the whirlwindness of it, but actually seeing that we've been through it, I've spoken to countless customers that have said our competition has been in, and they've talked about Agile, but they still work in a waterfall fashion, right? So they can't talk from the heart. I used to take Chris O'Malley in to see senior execs within organizations, and they'd be captivated by the story of, one day we were green screen and waterfall, the next we were Eclipse and Agile. And like I say, yes, there were some bloody noses, but by golly, the people that wanted to step up, they absolutely stepped up.
Yeah, regarding culture, there's a saying that I use all the time. I'm not sure who come up with it, but culture is not an action to be taken, but the result of actions taken, which means that culture change comes through taking action. So I'm a big believer in making things happen. I talked about earlier in getting started, the impact that executive buy-in and executive leadership can have in making this happen. I think it's absolutely critical. I think you can do it without it. But I also believe that to make this happen, you have to educate and get buy-in from those that are going to be charged with implementing this type of transition. They need to understand. Folks on the ground who are writing code, who are managing this delivery process, who are managing production, need to understand why they're doing it, what's the impact to the organization, what's the impact to them. And if you can do both of those things, get executive leadership to lead toward this type of transformation and the people doing the work to understand why it's important, you can make this go.
That's fantastic. And I want to turn this back over to Janine. Before I do, I just want to remind you that you will be receiving a copy of the 10 Steps to True Mainframe Agility in the next few weeks as we publish this. So, Janine, thank you very much for hosting us today, and I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Great webinar, gentlemen. I, too, want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and I especially want to thank Eric, Rick, and Craig for sharing their expertise with us today. Later this week, we will be sending out a follow-up email that will contain a link to the recording of today's webinar. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again. Have a great day, and stay well.